The film opens with an old man, the owner of a bookstore, as he receives a shipment of books to place in one of the library rooms. Among the collection, there's a strange and very rare book. At that moment, a man with sinister features enters. His name is Jeskub. He had already arranged with the bookstore owner to purchase that rare book. Jeskub begins reading through it and discovers mention of a magical medallion with extraordinary powers, a medallion currently in the possession of a young boy named Jay. When Jeskub pays the bookstore owner for the book, the man protests that the sum is far too little. Jeskub then threatens him with a knife, warning that he will end his life. Fearing for his safety and aware of Jeskub's evil intentions, the bookstore owner reluctantly accepts the money. Elsewhere, we meet Inspector Eddie, who is standing by a food truck waiting for his meal. Just then, his colleague contacts him to inform him that Jeskub's location has been tracked. Eddie immediately abandons everything and rushes to join his team, preparing to intercept Jeskub and his gang. The officers learn that Jeskub and his men are heading to a temple known as Coin. Without hesitation, they set out at full speed toward the site. Meanwhile, Jeskub's right-hand man, arrives at the temple first and manages to get inside. After searching extensively, he finds young Jay, who is in the middle of performing special rituals with his medallion, aided by a group of priests. At this moment, Eddie and his team reach the temple. But Eddie refuses to enter with weapons, believing it to be sacrilegious. Instead, his colleague Watson leads the rest of the officers inside, while Eddie waits outside. Suddenly, Eddie notices a powerful light shining from an opening in the ground. Compelled, he descends through it to find the source. There, he discovers Jeskard and Jeskub's men securing the area. A fight breaks out, and Eddie manages to overpower them all, pushing his way deeper into the temple until he finally confronts Jeskub. At that time, Jeskub is pressuring Jay to hand over the magical medallion and help him unlock its supernatural power. When Jeskub realizes Eddie's presence, he quickly escapes with Jeskard and the rest of his men. Afterwards, Eddie discusses the matter with a fellow officer named Sun, trying to understand why Jeskub sought out the temple and the boy Jay. It becomes clear that none of them yet know anything about the medallion's hidden power. 2 weeks later, Jeskub's attempts to capture Jay are still ongoing. As he seeks to persuade the boy to hand over the medallion, he sends his men to the place where Jay is hiding, on a boat anchored at sea, to abduct him. But Eddie and a few police officers are already watching the area. At the same time, a maritime security unit arrives, and a firefight breaks out between them and Jeskub's gang. In the chaos, one of Jeskub's men takes advantage of the situation, seizing Jay and escaping with a few others on a small boat. Eddie tries to leap onto their vessel but falls into the water, unable to pursue. Shortly afterward, he receives intelligence that the boy has been smuggled to Ireland. Determined, Eddie travels there and heads straight to the local police station to coordinate with them. He introduces himself as an Interpol officer. There, he unexpectedly reunites with Nicole, a former partner who had recently been reassigned to Ireland. Eddie apologizes for not keeping in touch during the past months, but Nicole assures him it doesn't matter, as long as fate has brought them together again. It's clear that Eddie is genuinely happy to see her. Nicole then takes him to meet their commander, a man named Smoz. Before Eddie can fully explain what happened and request assistance, Watson walks into the office. Clearly unhappy about Eddie's presence, Watson confronts him. Eddie tries to justify his arrival, saying he's only here to help rescue Jay and return the boy to a normal life. But Watson flatly refuses to work with him. Commander Smoz intervenes, demanding that Watson apologize, reminding him he cannot speak to a fellow officer that way. Watson, however, feels overshadowed by the attention Eddie is receiving, even though Eddie has only been in the commander's office for 5 minutes. Frustrated, he storms out. Eddie follows him, attempting to reconcile, admitting that in a past mission he had left Watson behind, but insisting he had no other choice at the time. Still, Watson remains firm in his refusal to cooperate. Later, Nicole suggests to Eddie that the three of them, herself, Eddie, and Watson, should meet for dinner, hoping to mend the rift between the two men. On their way to Watson's home, Nicole tells Eddie that they cannot afford to exclude Watson from the mission to rescue Jay, as he is highly valuable to their team, and without him, their chances of success would be slim. Before entering the house, Nicole warns Eddie not to mention that Watson is an Interpol agent, since Watson's family believes he works as a librarian. Inside, Watson's wife, Charlotte, warmly welcomes them. Eddie cleverly explains his trip to Ireland by claiming he's searching for a very rare book and suspects he might find it in Watson's library. They all spend a pleasant evening together, cooking and talking, and the tension between Eddie and Watson seems to fade. Old friendship bonds resurface, and by the end of the night, Watson agrees to meet Eddie and Nicole the next day at a designated location. The next day, Eddie spots Jeskard by chance walking down the street. The moment Jeskard notices him, he bolts, and Eddie takes off after him. The chase drags on for a long while, with Eddie facing several obstacles along the way, but he refuses to give up. Finally, he manages to corner Jeskard and trap him inside a dumpster so he can't escape. Eddie demands to know where the boy is, and under pressure, Jeskard reveals that Jay is being held at the docks. Eddie immediately rushes to Watson and Nicole, and together the three of them head to the port to rescue Jay. Nicole distracts the dock workers, while Eddie climbs up using a crane to reach the highest point above the shipping containers, giving him a full view of the area. From there, he spots Jeskub's men holding Jay. A brutal fight breaks out between Eddie and Jeskub's men. Amidst the chaos, Jay seizes the opportunity to escape, slipping away before anyone can catch him. Overwhelmed by their numbers, Eddie is eventually subdued and locked inside one of the containers. To his surprise, he discovers Jay hiding in the very same container, relieved to see that the boy is still safe. Meanwhile, Watson and Nicole engage Jeskub's gang, taking down many of them. Eddie manages to call Watson, letting him know that he and Jay are trapped inside a container. He pounds on his metal walls so they can identify which one it is. Nicole finally locates the right container, but just as she's about to open it, one of Jeskub's men uses the container crane to drop it into the sea. Water begins flooding into the container. Eddie reassures Jay that they'll be fine and tells him not to be afraid. Jay calmly replies that he isn't afraid at all. Inside, Eddie finds a buoy, quickly inflates it, and places Jay inside to shield him from the rising water. Then, Jay hands Eddie his medallion, asking him to tie it around the buoy. After some time, the police manage to retrieve the container from the sea. When they open it, they find Jay unharmed inside the buoy, perfectly safe. Eddie, however, has died, unable to breathe for too long underwater. Nicole and Watson are devastated by the loss of their friend. As they leave, Jay approaches Eddie's body and places the medallion in his hand. A brilliant light radiates from it, and Jay slips the medallion into Eddie's pocket. Later, during Eddie's farewell, Watson kneels by his body, apologizing again and again for not being there when Eddie needed him most. Overcome with grief, Watson covers Eddie's face. Suddenly, Eddie appears behind him, telling Watson he's glad he finally admitted his mistake. Watson is horrified by what he sees. Eddie alive and standing there, since Eddie is supposed to be dead. Eddie himself doesn't understand why Watson is frightened. When Watson explains and shows him his own lifeless body lying nearby, both men are shaken and confused. Eddie can remember nothing except the bright light that shone from the medallion. Curious, he asks Watson about it. Watson hands it back to him, saying it had been in his pocket. The moment Eddie takes hold of the medallion, his corpse vanishes completely. Stunned, neither of them can make sense of what has happened. They later visit Jay in the hospital, hoping he can explain, since the medallion originally belongs to him. When Eddie returns it, Jay splits the medallion in half, giving Eddie one side to keep. Just then, a doctor and nurse enter to take Jay for some tests, but Eddie notices something strange. Their shoes don't match those of the real hospital staff. He immediately grows suspicious and warns Watson that they must be Jeskub's men, planning to kidnap the boy. As they follow, the doctor suddenly opens fire, confirming Eddie's fears. What shocks Eddie most, however, is the discovery of his newfound strength. He leaps incredible distances, smashes through the ceiling, and when bullets tear through his body, they don't cause bleeding or death. Amid the chaos, Jay manages to escape when the imposters collide with a patient. Later, Eddie tells Watson about the powers he's gained, but Watson refuses to believe him, until Eddie grabs a knife and stabs himself to prove it. The blade has no effect. Watson is stunned, unable to comprehend what he's witnessing. At that moment, the police arrive with Nicole among them. Eddie hides quickly, not wanting Nicole to see him alive, since she still believes he's dead. Nicole takes Jay with her to ensure his safety. Meanwhile, when Jeskub learns of what happened, he furiously scolds his men for failing to capture a mere child. They insist the failure wasn't their fault. The mission would have succeeded had Eddie not interfered. Jeskub's men tell him they can't understand how Eddie is still alive, given that he drowned the previous day. Meanwhile, Watson and Eddie consult with a group of scientists, hoping to learn more about the medallion. Most of them know nothing, except for one, who explains that Eddie must have received it from the boy. He tells them the medallion only appears once every 1,000 years, choosing a single person to bestow with its supernatural power. That chosen one becomes immune to anything that would normally kill a human being. At last, Watson and Eddie understand why Jessica is so desperate to capture the child and obtain the medallion. The following day, Eddie decides to visit Nicole to reveal that he's still alive. Still unused to his newfound strength, he accidentally breaks a car door as he tries to get out. When he arrives at Nicole's building, he uses his powers to leap up to the higher floors and climb until he reaches her apartment. He knocks on the glass, and when Nicole sees him, she is overjoyed that he's alive. But suddenly, the window shatters. Jessica's men storm the apartment, attempting to kidnap Jay using a helicopter so that no one can interfere this time. Their plan succeeds. When Eddie leaps to grab hold of the helicopter, he falls from a tremendous height, crashing to the ground. To everyone's shock, he survives the fall without injury. Once Jessica's men deliver the boy to him, Jessica is ecstatic. He produces a vial of poison and orders one of his men to make him drink it, promising that if Jay does not use the medallion to save him and grant him supernatural strength, they must kill the boy immediately. Jessica drinks the poison, and Jay, frightened, uses the medallion to heal him, but Jay warns him that this does not grant him eternal life. Immortality requires the medallion to be whole. Jessica only possesses half of it. The other half remains with Eddie, which means to achieve immortality, Jessica must find Eddie and take the second piece. At police headquarters, Nicole tells Eddie that this means Jessica will eventually be able to gain eternal life if Jay grows older and helps him. Eddie reassures her that Jessica can only achieve that with a complete medallion, and Jay only has half of it. Still, this worries them, because it also means Jessica will return to hunt either Eddie or his partner Watson for the missing piece. Fearing for his family, Watson rushes home with Eddie to check on them. They find them safe, but soon after, Jessica's men arrive and open fire on the house. Charlotte reveals hidden weapons and demonstrates impressive skill in combat. Eddie tells them he will lure some of Jessica's men into the forest, where he can make better use of his powers. Inside the house, Watson and Charlotte manage to take down all the attackers. Meanwhile, in the forest, Eddie clashes violently with Jessica. In the fight, Jessica manages to seize Eddie's half of the medallion and escapes. Eddie regroups with Nicole and Watson, and they decide to storm Jessica's mansion to rescue Jay before it's too late. Once inside, they split up, each facing groups of Jessica's men in fierce battles, eventually defeating them all. Nicole makes it to the chamber where Jessica is forcing Jay to perform the ritual that would grant him eternal life. Jay, under pressure, begins the incantation. Nicole intervenes just in time, snatching Jay and escaping with the medallion. But Jessica uses his powers to chase her down. She throws the medallion to protect Jay, but Jessica strikes her from a great height, killing her. A final battle erupts between Eddie and Jessica. Their strength is evenly matched until Jay shouts to Eddie that the only way to defeat Jessica is by using the medallion itself. Eddie follows Jay's advice and, with its power, finally destroys Jessica. Shattered, Eddie rushes to Nicole's lifeless body, placing the medallion in her hand and begging Jay to help her. But Jay tells him that he can do it himself. He gives Eddie the medallion, and Eddie channels its power to restore Nicole, bringing her back to life, this time with powers of her own. Just then, Watson arrives, overjoyed that Jessica is finally gone. Eddie takes Nicole's hand, and together they race away at supernatural speed. Jay, meanwhile, steps into a magical portal, returning to his own world, destined to reappear in this one 1,000 years later. Left standing alone, Watson watches him disappear. And with that, the film ends. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.